Hello, good morning. This is Dr. Cool Fix. In today's video, I'm going to be teaching you about 10 symptoms of a bad coolant temperature sensor, its location, and how to replace them. So the first thing which I want to tell you guys on this very video here is I'm redoing a lot of my videos. For most of you who are my supporters, thank you a lot for your support. And the reason for this redoing some of my video is because and when I redo them I make them better is because YouTube is going really hard on me for like 5 months now. My account has been on demonetization because I'm finding a easy way to actually create those videos and put the information out there for you guys, and when my own accent hasn't well been improved for your own audibility. So I'm setting my own accent is quite getting. I hope it's not bad right now, right? A lot of you guys who complain that you can be able to hear me, can be able to hear me clearly. So, uh, like I said, that's exactly what I'm going to be doing to my channel, to give you guys the raw information which I have concerning some of these symptoms, so you use them to fix your car for free. And the reason to show you the location, why I show the location, is so you can be able to know exactly where to find it, regardless of your car make and model. So let's step in. First of all, what is coolant temperature sensor? Most of you might have been very familiar with a very sensor or heard of terms before, but you actually don't completely know the priority and authority that this very sensor here have over your car engine management and what it does into your system. But today I'm going to be spitting it all out to 10 top symptoms that it actually exhibits, including one you've not come across before. So let me flip the camera and show you some of the reflection. But before then, coolant temperature sensor is electrical electronic device or component which the engineer have actually put in place to actually tell you, report to you, the owners, exclusively on how the engine is performing, and also give that same information to the ECM to know exactly the state of the condition of the engine, if the temperature is up or down. Currently, when I'm talking about temperature, I'm talking about the temperature present inside the coolant circuitry. And what is the coolant circuitry? So let me pop this hood open and show you exactly where the coolant circuitry is and show you the coolant temperature. Then we start from there. To get to that, you first of all pop your hood open, and here we go. Voila. So the temperature sensor, coolant temperature sensor, ECT, is often located in either the top here or the down pipe that actually fed your coolant from the radiator. The reason there is that there are two different temperatures present in those areas there. One side is supposed to be cooler and one side is supposed to be hotter, because when the coolant gets supplied into the engine through the downpipe, it gets fed back. The hot one gets fed back into the engine. So the hot one gets fed back into the radiator, and when it cools it, it takes it and feed it here. So with that in mind, you should know that this one should be cooler, while this one should be warmer. Now let's get to it. When you trace this one right here, you can see this is a coolant temperature sensor. So for some cars they have two and some have one. For this car here, this car have two. Most of them, if you can find the second one, it probably stuck on the radiator. So you will find them most often times close to the thermostat. With that said, let's jump into the symptoms of a bad coolant temperature sensor. The first symptoms of a bad coolant temperature sensor is a check engine light. Why does it throw a check engine light? Because each time this coolant temperature sensor gives reading exclusively to the ECM, it feeds that information right here to your cluster gauge. And when you feed that information to your cluster gauge here, it uses that information to actually tell you how cold or how warm the engine is. So as you're seeing it here, the ECM is also seeing it. So if suppose those information is reporting is incorrect, then it's going to throw a check engine light, because it's something that is related to the engine. I hope you can understand that right now. On this very video, you have known most things that throw a check engine light on your dashboard is components that are related to the engine. The number two is, okay, this is actually supposed to be the number 12th, which is accompanied by a poor throttle response, also engine backfire. So what happens here is that when the engine coolant temperature sensor became mad and start throwing all kind of wrong data into the ECM that makes it to actually stimulate the ECM to send more fuel, you're going to be having a poor throttle response as much as engine backfire. And that backfire means that too much excess fuel has actually been added inside the system that cannot be burned completely, and so the excess that isn't burned is actually pushed out through the out valve and dump it inside the exhaust, and it get detonated inside the exhaust, which resulted into backfire. Symptom number 2 is the fan will not come on. In some cases, when you come around and see your fan here, when your engine has reached actually within the parameters where it's supposed to actually trigger this fan on, and the fan is not coming on, then there could be a problem with your coolant temperature sensor, because most electronic thermostat is engineered with the coolant temperature sensor here, that when it senses that there is a more heat, which is also a building up of pressure inside the system, that you might see it start popping here. You suppose yours is leaking like this one here, then it's going to actually propel this guy here. It's going to instruct the ECM. It's going to use that. The fan control module is going to pick that information and turn on the fan so that your car doesn't burn a top cylinder head gasket, because if you burn it, that's a huge expense. So some other time, if you discover that your fan is not running properly, check the wiring harness, the wiring sockets and the wires, make sure that they are all connected firm, check the relays, and if they are in good condition, there is likely chance that your coolant temperature sensor is bad. Now here I actually said 10, we're going to be going into 11 because there is a different situation for different car, and I'm going to be making it 11 here. So when your fan doesn't come on, you want to scan it with the OBD scan tool, which is actually going to be plugged in through underneath the car here, depending on the car make and model. The socket should be somewhere here. You scan it, and if you find any code related to that, then boom, you've caught it. Number 3 symptoms of a bad coolant temperature sensor, this is going to be peculiar with Passat model, is that when you're driving the car, automatic transmission for their DSG, you're going to find the shifter here will reset itself to neutral. Now that's actually a safety feature which they actually included there. That is some sort of a limp mode for it, so you don't overspeed when the coolant temperature sensor is bad. So if you have a Passat model that when you're driving and it will just switch the shifter to from drive to neutral, then you have a bad coolant temperature sensor. The number 4 symptoms of a bad coolant temperature sensor is a car starts and stall. A lot of you guys, when you start having a car starting and stalling, can often actually think that there are a lot of that the coolant temperature sensor doesn't have any jurisdiction or power to actually do that, but they actually do, because most manufacturers actually know that it's a huge repair to have your engine damaged due to a bad coolant temperature sensor. Now, if I need to explain or elaborate more on that, you need to understand that the engine is not just about reporting to you, to your dashboard, how the engine, whether the engine is cold or warm, or reporting to the ECM. The air-fuel ratio mixture is very, very important. In as much as the air-fuel ratio is very important to the optimization of your engine, the coolant temperature actually contributes to making it so. So in some car mix, when they are carefully engineered, that instead of having your car running into a big problem such as maybe engine knocking or whatsoever, then they put the car in some sort of a limp mode where you start it and it stalls until you go to a mechanic. Of course, there are a host of other problems that can actually make the car to start and stall, such as bad fuel pump, mass airflow sensor, and others. But when you're solving a problem related to a car starting and stalling, if you find a code related to coolant temperature sensor inside your car, don't think it doesn't matter, because they actually do. Number 5 symptoms of a bad coolant temperature sensor is a bad gas mileage, a poor fuel economy. Now, poor fuel economy is not only related to some sort of a clogged filter, all right, a clogged air filter, a bad MAP sensor or MAF sensor, or a bad catalytic converter. In fact, one of the main crucial components that contribute to car taking more fuel than necessary is the coolant temperature sensor. So when the coolant temperature sensor fails, how does it do this? It actually go. I have seen this on a scan to live stream data before. You're gonna be seeing some sort of a negative readings on the temperature of the engine. In some car make, you'll be able to spot it. You'll be able to spot it faster. But if you can be able to spot it faster, if you have a scan to, you'll be seeing something like minus 40 or minus 20 degrees Celsius. If you start seeing something like that, then what it actually means is the ECM is going to actually be thinking, yes, this engine is still cold. And what is actually some of the protocols of starting a cold engine? It uses more fuel to actually start up the engine. So it's also going to keep supplying the engine more fuel than necessary, thinking that the engine is actually cold when it's actually already warm. So, and that is actually going to be hitting your gas mileage and contributing to bad fuel economy. Number 6 symptoms of a bad coolant temperature sensor is a black smoke coming out of your exhaust. There are a lot of factors that can actually make your car to start ejecting black smoke out of the exhaust, such as bad MAF sensor and the rest of them. And it happens that the coolant temperature sensor also have the tendency. Now, when a coolant temperature sensor start going bad, there is a lot of things that goes on inside your engine, just like I've explained. Now, if you start giving a negative reading to the ECM and the ECM started opting for more fuel, start demanding for more fuel than they already need, what do you think is actually going to happen? It's going to result into black smoke coming out of your tailpipe. So if you find a car or your own car is actually ejecting a black soot out of the tailpipe, then you have every tendency that if you're counting up to 5 components that actually contribute to it, your coolant temperature sensor is one of it. Oh, Bully, you actually came to know how the coolant temperature sensor of the engine is, how it contributes to making your car not running fine, right? That's a good one, you know. That's what I'm telling them right here. I hope you wake up very well this morning. Okay, guys, Bully is also, she's Bully by name. I don't know what happens, but she seemed to be interested in the topic when she heard me actually explaining to you guys. Say hi to Bully. Okay, we go down to number 7. Number 7 symptoms of a bad coolant temperature sensor is engine overheating. How does it actually make this happen? When it doesn't have the correct data and it keep actually deceiving the fan control module that this engine is cold, the fan will not turn on even when your engine temperature, when your engine has attained the operating temperature, let's say like 90 degrees, all right? And when it doesn't turn on this fan on, what do you think is actually going to happen? Automatically, your car will start overheating. That is for most cars that are configured to actually use the coolant temperature sensor in conjunction with the fan control module or electronic thermostat. Then that is where you're actually going to see the car start overheating. So when you're solving overheating next time, if you found a code related to coolant temperature sensor inside your car, then go ahead and replace it. Before replacing it, you want to make sure that you check for the wiring harness pins and make sure they are not corroded or bent, because if they're bent, they're actually going to be giving a false reading. They're going to be presenting the same reading that the coolant is bad. So at that, even if you replace up to 10 coolant temperature sensor, you're not going to solve the problem. Now we'll go over to 8 to 9 symptoms of a bad coolant temperature sensor. The 9 coolant temperature symptoms of a bad coolant temperature sensor is actually a rough idle. A rough idle. When you have a rough idle, what the coolant temperature actually does within those area, if suppose the coolant temperature sensor is responsible or have failed, there is too much fuel than necessary that is going on into the engine, such as a rich, that is what I describe as a rich mixture. So at this point, the ECM is actually perceiving that you're a rich guy, so it's sending more fuel than necessary into the combustion chamber. And when that happens, it's actually gonna mess up with the stoichiometric ratio of 14.7 part of air to 1 part of fuel. And when that happens, you're going to be seeing a lot of unburned fuel going right there, and the idle is not going to be smooth. It's going to be anything but smooth. It's not one of them. So when you're troubleshooting a poor idle where you're having the needle going up and down, then you want to make sure that you check out for any code related to coolant temperature sensor. The number 10 symptoms of a bad coolant temperature sensor is poor engine performance. As you know, the critical role which the coolant temperature sensor plays inside the engine can't be overemphasized. And when you start messing with air fuel ratio, start messing up with the fuel, with the fan not running well, and you started seeing a rough idle right there, the engine power is going to be greatly reduced and not performing as peak as it used to. So within those time, you're going to be having some sort of a poor engine performance. So when you're having a poor engine performance, when your engine performance drop used to than it used to actually be, if you scan your car with the OBD and you find any code related to coolant temperature sensor performing below the threshold parameters or below short circuit to positive, go ahead and replace it, and that is actually going to aid in solving the problem of your engine underperformance. The next symptoms of a bad coolant temperature sensor: hesitation upon acceleration. Hesitation upon acceleration is also being accompanied with a bad coolant temperature sensor. Like I said previously, that when you're stepping on here, you are expecting the car to move snappily, but when you start stepping on here and this is actually sinking, behaving like it's sinking, you have a problem. There could be a problem with the MAF sensor, there could be a problem with the crankshaft position sensor. But if you rule out all those and there is no problem regarding those sensors, which I point out, and some others that are actually responsible, then you also want to look out for a coolant temperature sensor inside your car. If you find any code related to that, check the wiring harness pins, make sure they're not corroded, and if they're all fine and you are supplying up to 5 volts reference, which is actually supposed to be the signal power going to the coolant temperature sensor, check for constant ground. If there is constant ground, then the coolant temperature sensor is bad. Go ahead and replace it and everything should be fine. Number 11 symptoms of a bad coolant temperature sensor is crank no start. Wow, this is the ice on a cake. A lot of you guys who are troubleshooting a crank no start condition possibly might have been looking at a lot of other sensors and ignoring a coolant temperature sensor. I found a lot of things relating to that. For some car make, some manufacturers actually know how expensive it is for you to go through a harsh financial downtime of replacing or rebuilding your engine. And one thing that can actually lead to that catastrophic destruction of the engine is a bad coolant temperature sensor. So in such situation, they want to put the car in a limp mode. The first symptoms you're actually going to be noticing in this case is, if it is in the morning, is actually going to be mimicking the Hall sensor, the camshaft position. The car would not start. The car starts and stalls. So in this case here, the car wouldn't start at all. For some cars, if it starts, you're going to be dumping a lot of fuel inside the combustion chamber. But let's say like Toyota, for example, I've actually diagnosed a lot of Toyota that have those kind of problems where the technicians are busy replacing. The crankshaft position sensor is good. The camshaft position sensor is good. There is a lot of things that are good in that system there. But it's actually throwing a trouble code related to coolant temperature sensor. So a lot of other technicians who don't have vast knowledge, which I'm sharing with you now, have been replacing that coolant temperature sensor, and the problem isn't solved. So when I came over there, I checked for the coolant temperature sensor, and I've feeding me a history of how they have replaced a lot of coolant temperature sensor there. So I knew definitely there is something wrong. And what is that is wrong? There is a 5 volts reference volt missing in the system. The wire is just hidden, but it's cut. So when I trace it a little bit, that's why I say whenever I troubleshoot this kind of problem, you want to make sure that you check for every pins and check for the 5 volts reference that goes inside there. If it's missing, then there lies your problem. It's not going to be above that. Now that you know 12, it is not more even 11, it's 10, 12, 11 symptoms of a coolant temperature sensor. Do support me by subscribing to my channel, give me a thumbs up, and I gotta catch you on the next one on bad MAP sensor. And also after that, I'm going to be talking about bad MAF sensor. After that, I'm going to be talking about the bad oil level sensor. So there's a lot of them which I'm going to be talking about, just like I told you at the context of this very video. So the only way which you can actually help me or assist me in this very downtime of mine that I'm having an issue with YouTube is to support me prior to until when I resolve the problem myself. Thank you. Bye for now.